Hey guys, welcome back to the Strength Collective podcast. Can you believe it is episode number 2? So today it's myself, Tammy. I'm here with Chris, Ben and Alex, and we are going to be talking about toxic coaches. I know it's only Alex that can be eating what? Peanut butter? Is it peanut butter? What is it that you're eating?
Biscoff.
You know what? Can't complain. It tastes so good. So guys, episode number 2, toxic coaches. Who wants to give us a definition of toxic coaches so we can kind of start from that narrative? Yeah. I think let's throw it out to Chris.
I'm trying to think about what the best cut and dry description is. I was trying to discuss it yesterday with someone about toxic masculinity. I think it's toxic coaching is when it's kind of whatever traits or whatever behaviors that coach kind of displays, they're being displayed or pushed on you to the point where whatever good could come of it is now no longer good. It's just getting to a point where it's too much. So if you have a coach that's quite assertive and is how they've got the tough love approach, but it works. If they do it too much, eventually it just becomes where it's toxic behavior. So I think it's just where their behavior is so over the top or so overpowering or so intimidating, or however you want to think of it, that it's just not going to have a good effect on you.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah, so I'll jump in, Tammy. I think for me, and I was thinking about this earlier, what's the difference between a bad coach and a toxic coach, right? Because a bad coach could be a nice guy or a nice girl, but he just doesn't know what he's doing, to deliver results. For me, it can be one of these things or a combination: physical, emotional, mental, psychological abuse towards those people that they are coaching. And it can be a combination of those. That they're not caring about the performance. They are very manipulative in a way that, that it's all about the means to their end. They don't care about the people that they're supposed to be providing the service to. And that's the sort of 4 elements that I look at it when we talk about toxic coaching.
Yeah, I think I'd echo Ben. Yeah, I'd echo Ben on that. I think it doesn't matter what area it's in. We can find all these different facets of life. But if the coach starts having a net negative rather than positive effect on an athlete or individual, then it starts becoming toxic. And I don't actually think, I think you can be toxic and improve performance. Not necessarily as a decrease in performance, but a decrease in well-being. However you want to define that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I find that so many coaches, though, that are at the top, they generally have a few toxic traits. And I think they almost feel like it's their way or the highway, and forget that what works for one athlete may not necessarily work for another athlete, especially when, you compare athletes and you're like, oh, this person can do this. Why can't you? There's so many different things. So for example, I can talk about my track and field days where, you get told, well, if you can't do this, I don't want you in my team. For me, it's that's harsh and very toxic in terms of then pushing. We'll talk about what I want to talk about, because you guys already know about, offering things to people. But I do completely agree with Ben's definition. And even when I did look it up online, because I thought it was really important, that was pretty much the exact definition that was also given as well. So in terms of us as athletes and as coaches, do you feel that, you've dealt with a toxic coach in the past and you kind of have realized to make sure that that doesn't necessarily happen when you're coaching other people as well? Or?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, go on, Alex.
Well, I think one, have been part of having been coached by someone that I didn't click with, and who would drive that my way to high mentality, mainly rugby. But also I think when I first started coaching, I was probably that as well. But I think as I initially started coaching, I was probably guilty of being hey, this is the way to do it, and this is what I want. If you're not going to do this, I don't want to be there. I suspect a lot of coaches initially went through that. That makes sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I was talking to somebody a few days ago, and he made a valid point. He asked, as a coach, do you write a program thinking of the athletes in mind, or do you program how you think the athletes should train? You know, and I had to explain that it's a combination of the two, because you have your training style, but you've also got to take that athlete's movement pattern and body type and how they train also in part. Ben, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, so I was going to draw a comparison to when I was in the army. And the army's famous for its authoritarian, you do it this way. But actually, I think over the years, their coaching style, and we're talking about the physical aspect of what we did, right? I was in a combat unit, so it was high intense physical activity, you know, sometimes 2 training sessions a day. When I was in training, there was one particular, let's call him lead coach at the time, and he was that my way or the highway. If you don't do it like this, you will not get the results. And as a result of that, there were 2 guys that I went through the basic training with who left. And I tell you what, those guys, I was at university with those 2 guys, and they were high performing athletes at university and would have had exceptional careers and exceptional sort of progress within the military, not just because of their sort of physical prowess, who were actually their whole idea of what the role they were doing was destroyed from a physical sense because of this one individual, and they ended up leaving. And it was that whole, I think in that case, it was all around the sort of emotional and physical abuse, let's call it that those 2 guys had received at quite a young age. You know, you come out of university, you're going into your working life, but it was enough that those guys being highly physically adept wasn't enough for this one individual who broke them down sort of, you know, emotionally and mentally. And you can see that, I think, across, you know, many different sports types of physical activity. And it's just one thing that I harp back to, that's outside of, I think, you know, we talk about the strength sports that we're involved in, but I think it's far wider than that. It's sort of a point that I want to highlight, that, you know, throw out there, that I think it doesn't matter what sport you're involved in, you can translate it across.
Chris?
Yeah, I think I've definitely had experience with like toxic coaching when it comes to rugby. I think going through like academy systems where you get some coaches who they're out to prove themselves to coach you. So then it doesn't become about, like I say, so how do I get the best team together and how do I get these lads to play as a team? It was very much, it was their way because they wanted to show that their way was best. And I think that was a case of when you're in those systems, you want to get to the next level and you want to get paid for what you do. So the toxicness, like Alex was saying, to a degree is kind of almost accepted if they produce results, which obviously doesn't get people producing for long, because then the players burn out a lot quicker. Like Ben was saying, when you're treated that way, you don't last very long because you either learn to take it and you get good despite that treatment, or you just don't respond to it. And I think with weightlifting, like a good example would be like the Bulgarian coach Ivan Abajev. Like he was nicknamed the Butcher. Like he went through lots and lots of high level lifters who, if he would have given them a different training schedule to be like, okay, you don't have to train as often, you don't have to do these movements because they hurt you, he just went, no, I'll find someone else, it's my way or the highway, and bin them off. And then those guys have gone from being promising athletes to not being anything. With the actual weightlifting coaching, my experience has always been secondhand, like me getting someone and then them saying, oh, my last coach was nothing like this, they did this, this and this, and hearing some horror stories and being like, that's like, it's no wonder why you don't enjoy training, or why you're so burnt out, or why you get anxious before you lift because of the treatment you've had. So first hand from rugby, and then second hand from talking to other lifters, especially girls. Actually, they seem to get the worst of it.
Okay, and in terms of, because I like to say a toxic coach is pretty much just a bully, right? They've got bully tendencies. What traits for, let's say, a up and coming athlete that is relatively new to just sports in general, what kind of traits would you say a toxic coach has? Because for us, it's quite easy for us to notice, you know, that's a toxic coach. I actually don't think that's necessarily going to work for me. But sometimes a lot of us, and I can testify to this, you almost think like it's you, or maybe I'm doing something wrong, or maybe I'm not training hard enough, or maybe I just don't understand. But actually it isn't you, it's the individual. Do you guys have like traits that you would say of a toxic coach? So for me, I would say a great trait is somebody that just yells at you and just shouts at you all the time and doesn't know how to relate to you.
Can we swing it round to make it a kind of the opposite and say what positive traits are there in coaches who aren't toxic?
Perfect. Yeah, of course we can.
I just find that personally, I find that a bit easier rather than like putting coaches down. Let's say what we want to see, and like if you're an athlete, what do you want to see your coaches be like?
Definitely. Yeah.
Because in this case, I'd be like, well, it's easy for an athlete to find a coach who cares about them, right? Because you can tell when someone cares about you, because it's not just like, hey, how was your training today? Okay, bye. It's like what do you do? What do you feel? How do your training feel? Like, are you checking in? Like, you can tell when someone cares, but it's not so easy to tell when someone doesn't care, because you can blow it off, be like, oh, they're busy, they've got loads of stuff to do. All right, so I think maybe looking at it from that positive light, saying, okay, I'd rather look for this, and then flag up a red.
Definitely. So in terms of, from your perspective, what are the qualities that you'd like to see in a coach?
Well, number one quality is that caring for the athlete. Number one, I'd much rather see someone with like a subpar training knowledge who took into account how their athlete felt and like how they responded, than someone who's got all the athlete training knowledge in the world but doesn't care how the athlete feels at the end of the day.
No, I completely.
So number one for me is looking after the athlete.
I think
you have that do no harm as number one rule, right?
Yeah,
definitely. What's really important as well, Alex, and I think it's sort of fundamental from what you said, is that, you know, potentially unlike us sat here on the call, the majority of athletes, people who want to be trained by a coach, they're not doing it to become a world champion. They're not doing it to hold the biggest deadlift record in the world, right? They're doing it because it's a thing that they enjoy, that they just want to get better at it. And it's not their number one priority in life. And I think with that, someone who's going to listen to your wants and needs, say, I can only commit 2 training sessions, 3 hours a week, and that is it. And the coach can then adapt, and the adaptability of that coach to say, yeah, I can work with what time you can give me in order to achieve your goals. And then that comes to the understanding of what your athlete's goal is. I think that's all important in a coach, regardless of the level that they're trying to coach at.
That's a great point, Ben. Like, so rather than a coach demanding your time, so saying, if you're not going to train 5 days a week for 3 hours a day, you can't train.
It's a really interesting.
Like, I'm going to work here.
It's an interesting one. I had, ordered a t-shirt offline, and without sort of dropping the brand in there, you guys probably know what it is. And on the underside of the t-shirt, along the waistband, you flip it over, and it says, "If you have a body, you are an athlete." Right?
I like that brand.
Yeah. But I have to say that statement in itself, I was at my mum's the other weekend, and I whipped that one out, and she was like, "Yeah, but I'm not an athlete. I've got to." And said, "Did you go and do a 5K run a couple of years ago for charity too?" Yeah, you did. And that's the whole point of it. And I think that mindset could go a long way in, producing a okay coach to producing a coach being great. I think it's sort of fundamental mindset in the individual who is coaching whoever.
Yeah, I think it's like what you said is important as well. It's like you're trying to work with what the athlete wants to do. So if it's a bit different, if like you're a coach who's being paid and then the athlete's being paid and you're like higher up than them, like you'll know if you're a part of any kind of like quite high stress or like corporate company, like you might get some shit raining down on you if you don't do your job properly. But like, this isn't your job. You're literally paying us to make you better. So if you don't get better off of training 7 days a week because you don't want to do it, then it's kind of the coach's fault. And I think, yeah, I do think that whole statement. I've got that t-shirt as well. I knew what you were going to say as soon as you said flip up the underside of the t-shirt. But I do think that is true. Like everyone is an athlete. Like if you have a body, like I think I can't remember who said it, but I remember hearing someone saying like, as a coach or as an athlete, like the big time is wherever you are. So like if your biggest thing is you're going to do a half marathon for charity and that's the biggest thing you've ever done, that is the big time. That's a big deal. And you should treat it as such, and so should your coach, and they should care. I think I double down on what Alex said about the biggest thing that I want to see from a coach is that they actually care about your progress. So if you're investing money into them, then they should be investing their time and like some of their emotional, their energy back. So then you know they're invested in the process with you. But that's my main thing anyway.
I think for me, it's really interesting because I look at it from an athlete's perspective and I look at it from a coach's perspective. I would definitely want somebody that listens to me, and also, so for example, a lot of you guys know that I suffer from hip impingement. And there's been so many coaches in powerlifting that has said, oh, well, if you open up your stance, you know, you squat 200 easily. But then I'm like, hold on, I can't open up my stance because I suffer from hip impingement. Or, you know, if you have a wider, if your arms are wider, if you retract more, you will be easily benching 130. And I'm like, well, I have a shoulder injury from rugby. So it's like taking these things into account. Don't just throw numbers and don't just throw, I can make you do this. It's about also working with my body's limitations. I think that's definitely why I love powerlifting, because especially as a female, you can see so many different shapes, sizes, heights in the 84 category. And it's so inclusive and it's so welcoming that, you know, you can get somebody that has never lifted before competing in a competition with somebody that's competed quite a few times. It's very inclusive. If I could change one thing from, I would say, a coaching perspective, would be the fact that so many coaches almost kind of like have a template and just pass it on to all the athletes. So I've seen some coaches that will have like an Excel spreadsheet and it's the same exact program for every single athlete, but you're charging them, you know, exactly the same price. And you're almost saying, well, it's kind of tailored to you, but it really isn't, because it's an Excel spreadsheet. That's one of the things that I would say people should definitely look out for. Also speaking to other athletes and looking at their progressions, because not everybody can get to the top, but can you see their athletes getting better, moving better, taking all those things into consideration? From a strength perspective, Alex, what would you say are the things that you look for when you're coaching somebody new for the first time?
This is a big question, Tim. So let's first of all define like who the person is, right? Are they in because they want to get stronger? Are they coming in as a powerlifting athlete or a strongman athlete? Or are they coming as a general population athlete? Because there's two
it's a general population athlete, somebody that's just stepped off the street and said to you, Alex, I just want to be stronger.
In which case, I started just looking at the movement. Is the movement safe? Okay, is it even? So I started looking there, and then I wouldn't worry about those traditional strength lifts. Like, there's no reason that anyone needs to squat, bench, and deadlift. Like, I think a straight bar deadlift and a straight bar bench is a fucking terrible way to get strong. Okay, it just happens that our sport needs a straight bar because 200 years ago when people started doing this shit, they had straight bars. Okay, I live in there and then just meet them where they're at. Okay, like if someone's at like Chris, can you do like an 80 kilo goblet squat, like 2 40 kilo kettlebells?
Absolutely not. If you gave me one dumbbell, I could have a good crack at it, but getting 240s up there, no, absolutely not.
Right. And like Chris has got a decent squat for his weight, right? And if he can't do an 80 kilo goblet squat, there's no reason we can't get a guy on the street to come in and start training by doing really great movement with a couple of like kettlebells. Okay, that's an easy squat to do. Just like basically meet them where they're at, see where they're at, we can go from there.
So the reason why I ask that is, for me, that's the definition of a good coach, right? A toxic coach is somebody that just wants you to lift heavy, but a good coach is trying to strip you back and making sure that you can actually do the movement safely, correctly. And you also, it's almost that, you know, risk versus reward. You know, you could, you know, squat 140 kilos, but you can't do it technically, but you can get it in and out, versus what you're talking about, which is just stripping the person back and working for what they actually need and also what they want. In terms of weightlifting, do you guys think there are key kind of things that individuals should think about when also looking for a coach? So for example, for me, when I used to sprint, this is how I used to look for my coaches, guys. And this, I wouldn't recommend somebody to do it. We have something called Power of 10, right? Which has got all the rankings of the sprinters or just anyone that does athletics in the UK. And it ranks them up. So what I used to do is I would click, obviously, for female sprinters, the age group, and then you look at all the top sprinters, right? And then I'll just go to their coaches, assuming because their coach has got them to the top there, they must be a really good coach. How do you guys feel about selecting that way?
I think it really depends. If you've got like someone who's constantly producing people who are like, let's say, top 5, like at national events for sprinting or for weightlifting, and they constantly produce people in the top 5, and you see the same sort of groups of people every year, and then you see them producing new people, and it's like they have a history of getting people to that level. So like a prime example would be in weightlifting, there's a gym called Europa Weightlifting. Andy Callard coaches there. He's gone to the Commonwealth himself. He then has Owen Boxall, Zoe Smith, Olivia Blatch, Jack Oliver, like all of them have gone through that gym. And whilst he doesn't have loads and loads and loads of lifters all going through there, all of the national level lifters that he has, they're all like of a decent standard and they all compete. So with that would make me think, okay, so you're doing something consistently that means that you're getting those lifters in. So what is it? And from a coach's point of view, I know that some of it is recruiting, some of it's just geography. And you just have to be careful not to judge someone off of like one person they have. Like an example would be like CJ Cummings, the weightlifter in America. Like he lifts in a very unorthodox fashion, but his coach doesn't coach anyone else. So I'm not going to assume, oh, you can coach me because you only have one athlete. But someone else like Travis Mash or who is it? Matty Rogers' old coach, Danny Camargo. They have produced lots of people at a decent level. So I'd think, oh, so you have an ability to consistently do this with different people. So I'd go and want to know what they can do. Like I'd look at how consistent are you with making people better, and then are those people at the same level as you, or are they at the same level you want to get to? I think that's what's important.
Yeah, Tammy, we've spoken about this before, right? About selecting a coach, and I think it's really important, especially in powerlifting. There's some big name and big brand powerlifting companies out there. And I've probably spoken to at least 3 people over the past 6 months that have been with big brand companies who have left because they're not a big name. And certainly in powerlifting, I think there is a culture, the sport is expanding, and people think if you throw money at the problem, it will make you a better lifter. But actually, the personal touch that they say they're delivering, that they don't deliver, the algorithms that some companies have been accused of using when you're getting that personal service, but you're not at all. Something has gone wrong with that, and a week before comp, they've still got them doing 5x8 volume, and it's caught those companies out is an important thing. That certainly in powerlifting, as powerlifting has become fashionable, the selection of a coach becomes more important. And I think, from my view at the moment, especially in powerlifting or in strength sports, it's far easier to identify the toxic coaches or the toxic systems of coaches. Let's put it like that, because there are some big companies out there at the sort of those new athletes coming in. I think many of us will be experienced enough to say, I'm going to go with this guy. He's produced results across a number of athletes. I mean, you see those, they clearly cares about the individual in the sport, versus someone who's coming new into a sport. Now, Temi, we've spoken about, the team of powerlifting, the team of Bethnal Green Weightlifting Club, right? But it's still an individual sport. And I think on the flip side, we talk about, sports like rugby, American football, you get toxic coaches at much more elite athlete, senior level. But for what we're talking about here, strength sports, individual sports, I think it's the new lifters, the general population lifters that Alex spoke about, that are more exposed to that toxic coach. And selection is all important.
So, for example, I know this person, Ben, that joined Bethnal Green, that said she's going to be coached by a certain powerlifting queen. I'm not going to name her name, but you guys should know who I'm talking about. She is like the creme of the creme in terms of powerlifting females. She's like the biggest name out there. So we had this lady join Bethnal Green that was like, I'm going to be coached by her, or I'm going to buy her program because she's going to make me a world-class athlete. And I do feel like a lot of new people have that mentality, that think they can just buy a training program and it'll make them, really strong, or it'll make them as strong as that athlete, not necessarily understanding that that athlete may also be using vitamins.
super special.
Alex, you know who I'm talking about because
I do now.
Yeah. So, you know, in terms of that, how do you guys feel about, you know, that mindset of these new athletes that are kind of walking in thinking like, you know, at Bethnal Green, we get a lot of these young weightlifters and young powerlifters that come in and think they're going to be the next big thing in like 2-3 weeks.
So what, to tell me, I'm going to use me, right? I'm going to use me as this example, right? And then you can tell me I'm right, because let's be honest. So I came into powerlifting late in my life. I'd done other stuff. I'd done rugby to an okay level. Corporate environment, right? I'm going to do some powerlifting for some competition. I step in the gym knowing, because of Better Half, elite athletes. And straight off the bat, I'm like, I can be like them in 6 months' time. So what did Tammy's going to laugh, and she knows exactly what I did. I was like, I'm going to train like that because I can be as good as them in 6 months' time. And I burnt out. My first comp was all right. My second comp was trash. My third comp was even more trash. And I slowly realized it doesn't mean I'm not going to be that person in 5 years' time. But if it's going to be in 5 years' time. And I think it's, you know, selecting the right coach, which I feel I have now, helps me to temper my ambition and say, you're okay. You could be good. You could be really good, but it's going to take you at least this long. And we're going to tailor your needs. You're going to train this many days a week because it's the time you've got available to train and to recover, and truly understanding that an individual. Now, it's a two-way thing, right? Because it probably took me, 6 months, 9 months, Temmie, to truly understand that I wasn't Superman. I wasn't going to suddenly become as good as I wanted to be. I don't know, we all want to be better straight away, but in my mind, I had to understand that. And there's an element of choosing the right coach, but the individual buying into that as well. And I think some individuals will walk in the gym and actually they will never put themselves in the right position to get the right coach, because actually they almost have their own sort of toxic mindset, which leads them down a garden path to potentially a toxic coach. And that combination is never going to work. But it's finding that right individual, which I, lucky enough I have now. And that's really good. But it took me time. And you tell me, that.
And Chris, did you want to say something? I saw you.
No, not yet. I'm going to hold my tongue for now. I've got a lot to say on the topic. I'm not going to jump in yet.
So, talking about toxic coaches, also talking about the positive aspects from, coaching, trying to merge the two in a conversation. Specifically, Ben, we've had this conversation face to face about the service that you were getting before to the service that you're getting now. What are the major differences and how do they compare?
So I think, the coach that I'm with now, right, I think is, one, loves the sport and we know each other. So we kick it off on a personal note, much, much easier. Now, I think for me, the difference is my ambitions are quite high and I need someone who can talk to me on a daily, weekly, monthly basis in order to keep me on track. I have a business, busy sort of work life. Alongside that, I balance a busy training and recovery schedule in order to get where I want to go. And I think the main difference is communication and being comfortable to have that honest conversation with somebody. Actually, sometimes I can go with 2 weeks quite comfortably and I'll be like, Coach, I'm cool. Don't worry about me. I'm really, really good. But actually, after 2 weeks, he will reach out and go, no, we're having this conversation now because I know you're busy at work, or I know, you have only slept 6 hours a night for the last 3 nights. And enforcing that, that interest, that want for me to succeed, because he knows what my goals are. Whereas previously, it was program, test and adjust. You speak, once a week, maybe. And you move on to the next week. And before you know it, events can catch up with themselves. You never really feel invested in the process. Bottom line for me, I think it's around the athlete, because you're the one paying for a service, feeling invested in the process. And I quite like that term, because the process is whatever you want to make it, right? My process is different to Temi's process, but it's got to work for the athlete. And I think it's also all right as well for a coach to turn around and say, do you know what? I don't think we can work together because you're paying me and I don't think I can provide you the service. So it is a two-way thing, but as an athlete, you've got to feel that. You've got to feel like that you're achieving whatever your goals are.
No, I completely understand. So in powerlifting and let's say weightlifting and quite a lot of sports, it's different from team sports. Everybody's now kind of leaning towards that online training program. How do you guys feel like coaching? Can you give a good coaching via an online platform?
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Can you
push
tell?
A little bit biased, right? Because we
No.
Yeah.
So
No, and I think that's great to see it from, because I'm very old school in terms of I'm a very hands-on kind of coach. I want to be there. I want to see your movement pattern. So for me and for a lot of other coaches that are out there, don't necessarily, I do train people online, but it's not necessarily my first point of contact. Whereas with you guys, it is. And from you guys, what would you say somebody should be looking out for if they're getting an online training program from somebody?
Alex, we kind of both do online training, but we do it in different fashions. So I suppose the answer is going to be a bit different. For me, it's going to be, again, looking at what results people get. Like, I know that I can reach much and influence many more people going online first than I can in person. I would still encourage them, like, if they live near where I work and where we work, to be like, no, you're going to get your program, but then you're going to come in and train with everyone else. But if there's someone who wants to train with you, like if there's someone who personally, Temi, wants to train with you, but they're in Scotland, then they have to train with you online. And even though it's not as good, like, I'm not going to pretend that my online service is as good as if I had you in person with me every day. But if that person wants to train with you, you're going to get the most out of them, then that's the best way to do it. And I think looking at what results people get online, what their programming's like, going and just asking people, oh, you've been with this coach or done this program, what do you think, is probably the easiest way. Because if someone's online and they're quite a big name, you'll know someone who's been on their program or who is on it or who's thinking about it. So you can go and just ask someone else. Whereas sometimes if you work with a coach who only does in person, they only work with a handful of lifters. Like a good example would be Tony, the really old head from Crystal Palace. Like, he's not going to work with many people. So you're not going to be able to talk to that many people who really know him. But if someone's online, you'll be able to get a pretty good impression pretty quick out of like how good they are.
Yeah, I think you used some really good points there. The only addition I would make to that is, rather than talking to people, I prefer like creating a personal relationship first, which can be quite hard online. I tend not to work with too many people who start their lifting online. Does that make sense? So I'd rather they had an in-person coach first. And if that's
you wouldn't do a beginner.
then,
so it's in like,
yeah, we had this conversation the other day, right?
It's difficult, man. Like, I've seen some people who have like a gift for literally being able to take someone in any circumstance, being able to get them to lift, but it's not going to be as quick or as good if you're learning online. Like, it's more difficult.
Yeah, I think we've done it. I think there was a lady called Hikaru, and yeah, when did she start lifting? She hadn't been lifting long when we started working together. She was in the US, and she went all the way to second at US Nationals, from not having a lot of in-person coaching. But that's very much like the one example I can think of, personally.
Was she super compliant as well?
She was an ex-US figure skater, so like robot, right?
Yeah. So good body awareness, good compliant, like really compliant with training, so it's easy to see what needs to be done.
Yeah, so like that's the exception. Mostly, I wouldn't like to take on people who hadn't lifted in like with a person, like coaching person.
I think, Temi, in powerlifting, and this was always going to come up on this topic, probably the most recent prolific toxic coach that's come out of powerlifting at the end of 2019, 2020.
Can we not name any names, please?
No, don't worry about that.
Thank
I mean,
you.
everyone knows, but still.
Yeah, we could talk about it, just do not name the names.
No.
Thank you.
Was probably built 90%, if not more, of the business off online. You know, you look at the social media presence that this individual had. It was all new type lifters. I would suggest there was a couple of big-ish names that probably entice more people in, but it turns out that that individual preyed on everyone physically, emotionally, mentally, psychologically. And to be fair, you know, I think since the story sort of came out, it's gone a bit quiet, right? Probably for some pretty good reasons. But
well, everything's gone from what I've seen. Accounts like private, not talking to anyone. He's literally gone ghost. But that was inevitable.
Yeah, but I think the dangers there are, you know, would that have happened if there wasn't this online boom of coaching? Probably not, because you know, and I think that the reach of his toxicity as well was only fueled by the ability to do what he did online. Like, you would never have got away with that in person.
Yeah. So basically, what Ben's talking about is there was an allegation made against a powerlifting coach that he pretty much swapped, manipulated females for sexual pictures. He was verbally and emotionally abusive. But all of this is allegedly, but it has got to a certain point that this coach has now lost a lot of his athletes, and a lot of brands that were working with him has also cut their ties. But I do think at a point we all need to take responsibility for our own actions. And remember, if somebody's saying to you, I will send you a program, you just need to send me some nudes, you know, we've also got to use our brains to say that's toxic and there's something wrong there. But I do understand what you're talking about with this whole online business, because I was asking, who is this guy? Because people approached me having a go at me for not coming public and, you know, talking about him, but I didn't even know who this guy is. And it's almost frustrating, because who has he also made? He hasn't made or really produced people, but he managed to create this illusion of being such a great coach, and so many people bought into it and literally started joining his online program. But I can't judge him because I wasn't there, but that is definitely what I would define as a toxic coach. But it is getting kind of long, guys. So I want to throw this out before we all go. And Chris, I know you do want to say a few things about, you know, some of the things that you've dealt with in weightlifting and in rugby. But China has now officially joined the IPF. What is your perspective, and what do you guys think about that?
I don't think it's necessarily. I don't think it's going to be that big of a thing. Like, looking at the amount of Chinese weightlifters who've not fallen out of the system, but basically have retired from weightlifting and then got across to powerlifting is very small. And unless it becomes an Olympic sport, so it's like it's more of a political weapon to be a part of the sport, I don't think you'll see that many people actually going into it. I think you'll see some, like, you'll notice there's going to be like more Chinese international lifters at competitions, but it won't be the takeover that you saw within weightlifting in like the last decade or so. Like, there'll be an increase in participation, but not this massive surge of just like that power sweeping across.
Anybody else?
Yeah, so I think a nation like China being involved in the sport could be a very good thing, but like anything that comes out of China and Russia, you know, there is always going to be the black flag raising in the background, and it would be a devastating blow to powerlifting if that took over. And I'm sure, Chris, you've got multiple examples of weightlifting because, there is so many high profile documentaries out there on it. Is it going to happen? Probably. But, China's involvement, I think it's a good thing, but there's always the but with them. And I think that's the thing we've got to, keep in the back of the minds.
Alex?
Yeah, I don't think it makes a difference. I understand there might be an influx of lifters that might not be there before, but this influx of lifters doesn't have any effect on how strong you are. Right, like your numbers are still your numbers, and the only thing you're potentially missing out on is a medal, which is a big deal. Let's still get around. Like, you compete because you fucking love winning. In regards to the tested, non-tested question, I've got more experience in non-tested federations anyway, so it doesn't really make a difference there. In terms of IPF, it's the same rules as everyone else. Everyone else can get tested, right? There's no difference between that and then, was it Romanian weightlifting team, the 2012 one, got like all the medals taken away the weekend?
Oh, but yeah, they got tested. Some people got banned. They got retested again. So some people who are going to come out of bans have now basically just had their careers ended because it's like, now you got caught again.
Yeah. So I think there's no difference between that and these former Soviet states or Russian lifters being banned. I don't think it makes too big a difference.
I think the IPF not being in the Olympics helps. I think the Olympics,
sure.
because of like the grandeur of it and the different moving parts, as in like weightlifting, for example, instead of it just being IWF, there's IWF, EWF, so the European Weightlifting Federation. Then you've got the Pan American Weightlifting Federation, the Commonwealth Weightlifting Federation, British Weightlifting Federation, English Weightlifting Federation. So you know what I mean? It goes like on and on and on. That leaves more room for corruption because you've got so many different parts where you can kind of slip things through and accidentally lose something in a process. And because there's so much money involved as well, I think that doesn't help because the IPF is in charge of their testing and how they treat doping. I think, well, what happens if the doping goes rife? Well, they've just got to decide whether they deal with it or whether they don't. Like, it's not like with weightlifting where it's, so doping has been found, you've not been doing your tests properly, and also you've got quite a lot of people failing drugs tests, you might be at the Olympics. Like, the risk of losing your status isn't as big because you're under control of all of it. So I think from that standpoint, I don't think it'll be that much different either, to be honest.
I think it's interesting considering IPF. We all know that IPF have tried for a long time to become part of the Olympics. So I did find it very interesting that they've allowed this to happen, but we kind of knew it would happen. It was just when it would happen. But it's happened now. So it would be interesting to see what happens at the Worlds later in 2021 and see how the dominance happens. Literally, one of my friends sent me a message saying it's going to be America, China, 1, 2, 3, just fighting, and nobody else will get on the podium. It'll be interesting to see. It will be exciting. Guys, 2019 might be the last time I see a podium.
Just get that 265 pull, Tommy.
What do you guys think of Amanda's competition? Did you guys see the numbers and how the predictions were right? She's awesome. She's absolutely awesome. But did you guys have a little look at the pools? She got 9 for 9 as well. So yeah, I know, Ben, you definitely did.
Yeah. So for me, my only disappointing thing was I get it. She went for record numbers, all American record numbers, rather than let's see how big a total we could get. I felt like she left some squat on the platform, and I felt like she left some deadlift on the platform. Bench isn't. She's strong, but bench isn't like her forte, right? So it would have been nice, especially with all the all the social media chat, for her to really go for it.
Guys, he said bench is not her forte. Her bench was 130. So squat was 256 kilos. Bench was 130 kilos. Her deadlift was 260 kilos, which was the squat and deadlift was an unofficial world record. Yeah. And her total was 646 kilos.
I think that's the right decision. Like, looking at it again, like, I think we must be looking at the same post. So I wanted to double check it, but like, none of it looks like. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're right. There are, like, Ben's right. There are kilos left in the tank, but it's the same as like Lasher going and to an Olympics or a world event, and every time he'll go, oh, my record's 214, I'll go 216. When you look at him, it's like, you could do 225. It's like, well, why am I going to do that? Because then everyone else is going to know that's where they've got to catch up to. And also, like, those few extra kilos, when you start grinding it and start really having to struggle for it, does take its toll on you. Like, doing records like this where you smoke it and it doesn't even look hard, that means that the next competition won't have to be as far away and you're not going to be as beat up. So, I mean, I would have liked to have seen a 270 pull, but that's just whatever. Like, looking at it, it's like, oh, there's definitely some of that in there, but I can see why those numbers are the numbers that they've chosen.
She definitely played it safe. She went 9 for 9, and I think that's one of the things that she really wanted to go for, was 9 for 9, because she made a big statement saying, yeah, this was her first time ever going 9 for 9. So, like,
I think you're right.
Yeah, that was her first time ever going for 9 for 9. So, you know, that's amazing. So that's pretty much it for this week's chat. I hope you guys enjoyed talking with us. Please don't forget to follow us on our YouTube channel, The Strength Collective, and also like our page on Instagram, and we will see you guys next week. Bye, guys. Say bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.